to the Universal Ones Artist Collective. I am your host, Buddy James. Please don't forget to subscribe and like our channel. And always, if you like our content, hit that bell because that's how we get seen. Thank you again. Enjoy the episode. All right, today's episode is intense. We have Robert Hawthorne going
Sr.
deep in the subject of graven images and what they truly are. We also have him touching on the base of the Ark of the Covenant and electric universe architecture.
The Hebrew language is 22 different symbols that are actually electrical things. And I keep trying to type in and say, oh, I want to say something. Oh, I want to say something. And here's what it is. First of all, there's a book written called the Bible Codes, where the guy takes and puts it down. He takes 5 letters this way, that way.
Yep.
And on the page where the written words is, they found it out. Now it's back into 7 different deep Bible code books. They're Bible coding it over there with big computers. And there's one sentence in that book that stuck out when I read it. And this is near the end when he writes, everything that I have done here is on a linear plane. I lay it out and I go this way, that way, and this way. However, if you would roll this 17-foot scroll up into a roll, and it would be holographic in its effect, you would literally have infinite amount of combinations. And I read that sentence and I'm thinking, well, shit, there's a guy in the 6th century rabbi that said everything that was, is, and will ever will be is recorded in the Torah. And so I realized that the Ark of the Covenant, when they had that, everybody thinks there was a couple pieces of stone put in there and Aaron's rod. Well, that was carried a couple times. But what was put in there is the second time the guy goes up on the mountains, he transcribes for 40 days and 40 nights 2 17-foot scrolls written with these 17 or 26 different combination letters, which you're now saying are forms of electrical discharge. Everyone has to be put in a perfect line, a perfect straight thing. If one line or one letter is out of 17 feet, you got to do the whole thing over again. And you had to practice 7 years to do each letter because Hebrew is the only letter that is known to be sacred in its form. They ain't got fonts. They ain't like Niswa Nu G. It's sacred in its form. One letter ain't out. Then I read in this other book 12 years ago or 20 years ago, they found out that all the scroll, the entire scroll, was written with electrical conducting ink. And they're thinking, why the hell would God tell Moses he would use electrical conducting ink? Well, maybe because it's like a piano keyboard, player piano. You roll it up into an infinite amount of combinations. And what they did is they put it into all artist representations were in 2 gold cylinders, where at the end were 2 gold balls. And those gold balls had little discs at the end that were like air discs, and one was as big as an MP3 player, and they went up to 45 size. And there's about 6 or 7 on each end. That went down into the Ark of the Covenant. Both gold balls touched the ends. The Ark of the Covenant had a 2,500-pound lid. You can't lift 2,500 pounds, 4 guys, don't care. But they had the Levites, or the guys that levitated it and carried it in their bare feet. It supposedly is an electrical conductor, and when my brother was in the Air Force, his major tells him it's not only a capacitor or an electric capacitor, it's self-generating. I'm thinking, what the hell does that mean, self-generating? What that means is it started itself. Well, it ain't really true. What happened was when they put these gold things down in the Ark of the Covenant, and the guy went into the Holy of Holies with this tablet on his neck, hanging down with 12 different jewels, which, by the way, buddy, resonate different things. And they were connected to 2 gold cables that went up to the round things on his collar that were the ephod connectors, which was some kind of a cape. On one left shoulder, what was said when he went in there in the antiquities of the Jews was when they opened the door of the Holy of Holies on the day of the equinox or whatever, those doors allowed the sunlight to go into the Holy of Holies. It hit off of that breastplate. It shot a beam up into the ceiling, and the Ark of the Covenant levitated, self-levitated 3 inches off of the table. Okay, so let's say that all happens, and inside that you have a hard drive computer, and anything you ask it, it would tell you. Well, that's just hypothetical because we got that shit today. Well, then what if he had Bluetooth, and when you had to have the Passover, you put a little piece of that electrical conducting thing on your doorway? That'd sort of be like your Wi-Fi. What I'm saying to you is everything in there proves that maybe the Ark of the Covenant does have all the information for the world, from poor past and present, as a history in a codex. That would be a reason you'd rebuild the thing because you'd find out what the hell we need to do, and it would contain everything in it. That's also, here's a good question that you can think about. In those Bible stories that everybody's talking about, and you're Luciferian or you're Jesus or you're Abrahamic or you're this guy or that guy, what language are you talking about? Because, if you say that you were Luciferian, wouldn't that be just about the same as saying you're Venetian or you're a Martian or something like that? Because what language is Lucifer from? And in the Roman language, they called Venus Venus. That's why we know it. But they called it Isis over there, and they called it other things, Astarte, or whatever the hell they called it. But what did
Ishtar.
they call Venus? What did they call Venus when they were speaking Latin? What's the Latin word for Venus? What's the
There's a
Latin
couple.
word for Venus?
There's a couple of different
Lucifer.
goddesses.
Hold on. Lucifer is the Latin word for Venus. So a Luciferian, boys, is just somebody in the olden days that worshiped Venus, which they all did at that time. Every religion, as Velikovsky says, and David Talbot says, every religion on the whole world prior to the time of Abraham was worshiping the planet gods. They all worshiped Saturn, Saturnians. They were the children of Saturn, were the Romans, and then they changed to who? The children of Jupiter. Okay, all those things happened. Why is Abraham the father of all nations? Because he bore every child? And no, he didn't. What Abraham did was he went and he had God talk to him, really, a guy talk to him. So he goes into the father, I think his father Terah, and they worshipped all the gods of heaven. And they had representations of those gods on the planet that were like the statue of Zeus with that thing in his hand. But Zeus was really Jupiter. Okay, so there, what you have is there are just these things there. They worshipped all the different things that were statues. Abraham went in and beat the shit out of them with an axe. And when Terah, his father, comes in, he said, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, that one there beat the hell out of this one," and they all killed each other. To show them that statues ain't the real thing, he then adopted from El, which was Saturn, or On, which came from Heliopolis, he adopted Elohim, which is the male female creation of Genesis, where it says, "Let us make man in our own image." He's talking to his old lady, and he says, "Let us make man. We're male and female. We're not an old man, young man, and a ghost." The Trinity came out of Constantine's mouth, who worshiped the moon, by the way, or the sun, which at that time was, never mind. Anyhow, here's a question for you. Here's poor ass Moses. He's walking along the road. God appears to him, the living God, because they didn't know what was going on. And then he appears to him later. Listen to this. Up on the mountain, the people hated. "Oh, look at that. It's coming out of the sky. It's the glory of God." Same one that went to Ezekiel, the same glory of the Lord. Okay, so they get scared. Moses has God appear to him, so he believes. Next time, God takes him and he says, "Listen, dude, I want you to go to your people and tell them you're going to leave Pharaoh and go out into the wilderness. I'm taking them home." And okay, Moses hears. He said, "Then I want you to go to Pharaoh, and I want you to go to Pharaoh, and I want you to say, 'Let my people go.'" You do that, Moses. And Moses is thinking about that problem, and he says to God, "Why would they believe me? How can I do this? Why would they believe me, sir?" He says, "Because God, I can't even speak the language real good. They don't even understand my words. Why would they follow me and everything? And then if I go to Pharaoh, why is he a meek little guy like me? Why will he do this?" And so God has to convince him it's okay. What does God answer Moses and say? What's his answer to this plea, "Save my ass here"? What does God say to him? Does anyone know? Anyone? Y'all
I'm in the
stop.
I know
store.
nothing
I am that
about
I
it.
am.
I can't remember.
What did he say? What? What was it?
I am that I am.
No, I was close though. It was sort of rhymes. Here's what he says. Here, picture this, you guys. You're standing there. You have to go do this pro. Here's what God says to him.
He says, fear not. Fear not.
Here, hold on. What is that in thine hand? What is that in thine hand? Now, wait a quick a minute here. Moses, if you all remember, of course, Charlton Heston portrayed it well in Cecil B. DeMille's. He kills the guy, the Egyptian, and they strap his arms to that big piece of wood, and he takes it out, and then he beats it out on a rock and kills a lion, and that's his staff, right? That's what we get. So, okay, if that's what you're saying to God, and he says to you, what is that in thine hand? You say to him, it's a damn 2x4. I picked it out of the construction site. Or it's a stick. I got a limp. It's a piece of wood, buddy. Don't you know everything? Why did God say that? Did he not know what it was? Or did Moses not know what it was? I'll tell you,
Probably did not know the
Moses didn't know
significance
what
of what
it
it
was.
was.
Yeah, Moses did not know what it was. So he tells, it wasn't a piece of wood. He says to Moses, throw it down. He throws it on the ground. It becomes animated like a electric snake, and it eats the other ones up like a plasma thing. Moses picks it back up. That was called, from that time on in the Bible, the rod of God. Now, what was it called in Hebrew? It was called the stick Jehovah. Okay, now if you look at scriptures and read all these old books, you find out the Antiquities has other books, but in the book of Deuteronomy, it talks about the book of Jasher. Now, it was published, the Rosicrucians put it out, and others, and it's been used an awful lot. It was written by some Jewish scholars in the late 1800s. They found these old scrolls. It was reviewed by hundreds of Hebrew people. They say the words are correct, and at that time, they didn't really know too much about how things worked. So it goes along with the whole story of the Bible, except there's differences, a little big differences. Here's one. Where did Moses get this stick? It don't even say. Here's what happens. If y'all know any stories, Moses gets thrown out, and so what he goes is he travels to Mindia, and he tends the flocks of Jethro. Well, who was Jethro? He was the king of Mindia, and he takes and he says, here's what the book of Jasher tells you. And everything in there is exactly the same with a little more detail. What happens to Moses is he goes in, he's a Hebrew, and he's one of the trained and everything else like that. So the king don't like him, and he puts him in jail because he don't like the God that this guy believes. So he puts him in jail, and he says, okay, if you're really a man of God, I ain't going to feed you water nor food. See how that works for you. He throws him in, but the king's daughter decides she likes Moses, and she starts feeding him secretly water and food daily. And she does so for 10 years. After 10 years, she goes to her father, the king, and she says, you know what? You put that Hebrew in there 10 years ago to see if he was really a man of God, and didn't give him no water, no food, or anything else like that. Don't you think it's time to leave him out? So he says, yeah, okay, we'll do that. And he opens the door. Out walks Moses. So he says, wow, you must be really a man of God, even though it was a trick. Okay, so he takes him into the temple and he lives with him. He makes Moses his main guy. That's in the scriptures. And Moses is walking out in the garden one day, and he finds this thing in the garden stuck in a big stone, like Excalibur. And it's a metal staff, and it has jewels on it, and it has a sapphire tip on it, and all those different things. And so he pulls it out. That makes him the guy. That's where he gets the rod of God. Now, if you think about that, maybe that could be true. It was a technical apparatus that supposedly the guy that built this earth and laid the foundations of it, when where the hell were you, Job, when I did that, when I laid the foundations of the earth and everything? Maybe it was done. And maybe there was some kind of an apparatus that was used to do it or to restructure it here. Let's say it was a highly technical rod. If you know your Bible, everything that poor Moses did, he never did a miracle in the man's life, never did nothing. All he did was carry the rod. He hit the stick on the rod, the turns water out, there comes thousands of people. Everything he did, throws it down, it eats the Pharaohs. It wasn't no piece of wood. Neither was the glory of the Lord that appears at Mount Sinai, and to Ezekiel 3 times that your Joseph Blumrich writes a book and leaves NASA as the head design engineer for the eagle that landed on the moon. Joseph Blumrich quit his job and started preaching that, yeah, Ezekiel saw a spaceship. He wrote it, he got patents on it and everything, and quit there and preached. So what if the Old Testament has all these things in there so highly technical that if you really knew the stories, you'd say, wow, maybe the earth is young. Maybe this did happen. Maybe there was a big civilization that knew way more than we knew, and we're just coming back to it. Now, maybe that's all true. And what we're going through, thunderbolts, electric universe, electric plasma, plasma discharge, you're sitting here talking to an old guy that don't know shit from fat meat about any of the things that I talk to. Yet on a channel that I'm on to, I have all the time Eugene Bagashoff's on there an hour or two every week with us. Bruce Laybourne, Neil Thompson, the guy that is a geologist, stayed here at my house. Bruce Laybourne. I have Ito Call, everybody else, and I see these guys and get to say something, and I think, Buddy James, all the people that I have freaking met and guys that I really want to meet, like James Sorensen and Seeley, I'm watching this and talking about what we're doing with this store over here to try to unify some things and give a way to monetize deals. And as I'm talking, I look up and there's Eugene Bagashoff, who I had just watched a 12-minute show on how chimneys and the sine curve and the galactic things are looking in a straight. I don't even know what a chimney is, and I listen to his voice. He's amazing. He knows more words than all of Utah put together. He's eloquent. And he sits there for an hour, and I'm watching it on this site. And all of you other guys, we're all talking like this together. And I'm thinking, wow, this site holds these two people for 2 hours every week. And he's on in the morning 12 hours and gets 18,000 views in 2 days. And you put things out there and everything else. This is an important freaking thing. This is bringing together, as I've always said, religion, science, philosophy, whether your heart looks like a tree, whether the mud fossils guy looks right, there's vaginas that grow. Everything grows the same patterns. It's all electrical, it's all plasma, it's all everything. But we are at the epitome of every voice coming together and teaching me stuff. So if I get a little help from whoever's been helping me to get this store opened and run this, we have a place to run this whole thing through everybody. It doesn't have to be one channel, 18 channels, everybody got our own. And the fights that are happening are going to come out of it. I've never seen anything where it doesn't happen. And it has to filter and everybody find their level. And I have done these things for a long time. And when Ramon talks about people being around him than everything else in karate, I've had some experiences, sir, in that development myself. I used to have lunch with a guy every day who had to go and sit on Saturday morning, honest to God. Every Saturday morning, he was invited to Big Tuna, Tony Arcardo's house, because Big Tuna, head of the outfit in Chicago, liked Saturday morning cartoons. Now tell somebody that Tony, Big Tuna, liked Tony. Okay, other people.
I
So
will say
like
if
this
people
there, Carmi,
on a
I'm
side
done.
note,
I just want to say
if
these things
people,
because the other thing was with mostly about the Jewish language. It is a codex like that, and I've always thought that the Ark of the Covenant was a computer. It told you anything you wanted to know, which leads you to understand why before, and if there is a laws of God or 10, and they have an order from here's who he is to don't the last ones I think you can add all together. Don't cover your wife's neighbor's wife's ass or something. But up in the middle of it are the important ones, but the top is most important. So before you kill your mother and father, you are not supposed to take his name in vain or take it in emptiness. And number one, you ain't supposed to have no graven images. Don't kill, don't steal, don't do this, don't cheat, don't lie. Graven images, sir, is 3 paragraphs long. He's so pissed he's going to, anyone who does it, 3 generations of their children are stymied. Now, what the heck was a graven image? If you think it's you bow down to a chair is a graven image or to something, no. You have to find out what were they. Why were they so bad that Jacob buried them all? And why were they so important that the only thing that Laban wanted back from everything that Jacob took, cows, horses, women, his old ladies, everything, he only wanted back his images. What were they? That before you kill your mother and father, it's more important for God not to have those. Try to figure it out and then call me back. Because if it's true what the book of Jasher says they were, our government was working on that under the same closed doors where they did the atomic bomb in 45 in New Mexico, working on a program when Warner von Braun was there, and I think it was in the middle 60s or whatever the hell it was, called the Human Solo Mind Project. Because they said as one. Pardon me?
I'm gonna jump in there real quick. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know your screen. I can't see. Go ahead. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm just posting. These are the original 10 Commandments before the Council of Nicaea. These have been translated out of the Vatican vaults. So they let this man Mauro Bellino. They let him in. They regretted it afterwards. But
I bet they did.
he did a literal translation, so you can see on the left those are the actual original commandments, and then on the right were the decided upon, agreed upon versions. So just thought that since he had brought up the 10 commandments there, you may find some of them a little bit odd.
Well, that's according to Catholicism. If
No, these are the
Council of
translations.
Nicaea is a long time ago. Like
This is
1,500 years ago.
Folks, what I'm telling you is these are the translations of the original Hebrew texts that are kept in the Vatican vaults. He was allowed into the Vatican. It was very rare access. And then after they saw what he was doing, giving literal translations, then they revoked his access. But he had what he had, and he put it out in this text. And if you want to watch his videos, they're all in Italian because he's an Italian man.
Mm-hmm.
And he makes no claims that it's aliens or anything. He's just telling you what it's not, because he's had a look at the original text. So something that might interest some people.
Graven images, as I was saying,
It's still the first one.
What Warner von Braun said, that if we're ever to put astronauts out there and everything, we need a computer that even with today's chips would be as big as a building, and there's not a thing that could send it out there. It would have to almost be able to come up with self-education and come up with things we don't understand to program. It would have to be almost that. So he said that, and he said it always will be the same, is that a human brain would still be the best computer you could use because it has the ability to think and has the ability to do that in much quicker than any computer does. And so he said that if you would separate the human brain from the body, because your senses actually limit your brain. Your brain can smell 500 different smells in a second, 500,000, 500,000 smells it can segregate each second. But if you put 30 different things in a bucket and stick your head in and one's poop, that's all you smell, you cannot do it because your nose stops what goes to your brain. So your brain can identify them with lightning speed, but your nose stops that so that you don't walk past everything and smell it all at once and go crazy. Same with your eyes, all that. All those things can work very, very fast. But if you separated the human brain out of the body, then it would be having very, very quick speed. So let's say that what we're looking at, here's what
I just want to, I know you're on a stream, but don't you think that it's far more likely that what was the Ark of the Covenant is essentially what we would see inside of Mecca, which is a piece of rock.
Shut it off. What's that?
Piece of rock. Don't you think the most likely thing that was in the Ark is a chunk of rock? I mean, realistically, when you have a cult of people who are going from worshiping, because idolatry meant planet worship. If they're going from worshiping this to that, if they're sometimes worshiping sin, which is the moon, if they're worshiping different bodies, isn't most likely the thing that they're going to collect, if they're wearing stones on their chest, the thing that they're going to put into the box, a chunk of rock that had fallen that seemed to have a different form. It may have been radioactive because of some of the arc discharge properties. And so then they had to, basically
could have been charging up the arc, actually put something radiation in it. Yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Maybe so. It could have been they needed to shield it.
Well, I mean, the gold would shield it, but it would build up a charge. So
yes, it would, because it was in 2 layers. It was gold within wood within gold.
Perfect charge. Right, and a perfect charge would be the golden mean, and that's the exact measurements of the Ark of the Covenant.
Are you saying you have to charge? Wait. Are you saying you're charging the Ark of the Covenant? Is that?
There's no doubt that. Well, here's what we know: people would die after touching it directly.
Hold on. Let me tell you. Hold on. When I was at this point where the major that's talking to my brother said it was a self-generating capacitor. Capacitor stores electricity and put it out that's all I know. It stores electricity and can put it out anywhere. Yada yada.
It stores it in an electric field.
Not self-generating.
What happened? Wait. What did they do when they put together the 2 front doors of gold, the gold cables between them, the brass pillars outside, opened up the gold cables that connected to that? You can see plus and minus. I'll show it to you. But here's the thing. In the Ark of the Covenant, it was in there. When the high priest went in, what did they do to do it and to charge it? Here's what they did. You read it in the scriptures. When they got it all set up, this big golden thing out, looks like a big battery out on the desert. You wouldn't walk into it if there was a lightning storm. They stood around it, the whole congregation of 3,000 people, and they sang the sacred Hosanna and played the Jew thing, the trumpets. That vibrational sound, that vibrational resonance vibrated the 2 pillars outside. They were 60 foot tall with big parabolic dishes that when they were hooked up to this gold thing, one side put out fire, one in water, symbolic or not, plus and minus, positive and negative. They sang the sacred hosannas. That vibrational thing in the side of that put the juice in the box. That's what caused it to levitate and activate. Then when they took it out to their enemies, the Levites, who had to walk with their bare feet and they walked levitated, they knew the secret for levitation. It would sometimes go into the enemy's cast themselves. It floated. So there was a way to activate it, which was just generation of frequency into resonance, sonoluminate, whatever you call that stuff today. That's what we're coming to. So that's why
you don't need complex resonance if you have an electrostatic repulsion, right? I mean, the electricity.
Could we build this?
Of course, there's schematics. It's described very well in the Bible. It's expensive though. That's the thing, is that no one's wanted to put out the expense of putting together a box where you have 3 inches of gold around, then you have this very expensive wood, and then another 3 inches of gold on the inside there, and then the exact mechanism of the top has been also something that is been discussed, is that they weren't ornamental, but they were performing some kind of function. Yeah.
Yeah, the name of God apparently was between the wings.
Okay. Do you see the 2 cherubims at the top? They say that. What about, you never see pictured, never see them pictured. What about the 2 15-foot cherubims that were the end of that? What did those gold cherubims?
You guys do know that that's Egyptian though, right?
Everything we're looking
That's
at right
Jachin
here,
and Boaz.
that's Egypt.
Hold on.
That's all Egyptian, man. That's all Egyptian. You can go
Yeah,
right to the wall.
Okay, hold on,
Come
Sean.
on,
I know
man.
it's Egyptian, but
Right.
Egyptians were electrical. Here's what they were. There were two
Right.
15-foot cherubims where it says that one wing went towards the back wall, which was 6 inches of gold, 20 by 40 or 50, whatever the cubits were. And then there was a gold cable, cable that connected it to a hook at the back wall. That wing went that way. The other wing went up in a arc or arch up over the Ark of the Covenant, where the wing on the other side, that 15-meter high one of cubits, that wing went towards that other top, and they were connected with a gold coil, a gold ring. That other wing went to the two front doors and was connected to that gold wall, 6 foot high. Then if you open both gold doors and connected the gold cable to the two cherubim boim outside, which were parabolic dishes on top of a 60-foot higher than the temple brass tubes, they were they were the receivers. Then you had a complete circuit when the doors were open, one at the back and the front as a battery. Then what happened was the two cherubims went up over the ark, and they had a cannabis cloth that was strewn with gold thread. It was woven with gold thread. Well, if you have clothes with gold thread, it's gold thread. If you take cloth and you run gold wire through it, then you have a thing. So what they did is they put this form of wire through, and Sean will know this, when they put this wire through that big thing that went all the way on top of it, it was stretched, you can read, it was stretched taut, very tight, and connected it to two gold things that went to the Ark of the Covenant. So what you have there is electric static speakers, like magnepans, that are just nothing but wire strung on a membrane, looks like a screen door. And so you have this high ark, and that's why you have the Ark of the Covenant and the ark, they're all from same thing. You have a very tight stretched canvas with gold wire going through it, connected to this big battery system with this stuff inside of it that rotates at a very fast speed, and you have the computer. Anything it would ask it, it would tell you that. Anything. That's what Nebuchadnezzar found out. He takes it back, builds it three times bigger.
Again, though, I mean, the Chinese used to ask God things all the time using turtle shells. You don't necessarily need it to be a computer for you to receive. The priest has the leeway. The priest shaman has the leeway when he's in the presence of the holy, and you are in the state of what the Chinese called Tong Shen Ming. Then you have the leeway to interpret the will of God through the electric force, through your plasma connection, through your crown chakra, which is, of course, the upper end of the tree of knowledge or the tree of life, depending on how you use it.
Julian James loves you guys right now, by the way.
Okay, that's cool.
Okay. So you don't need it.
And so then you would be able again through this holy rock. All the tablets could have been carved on. So he could have ascended Mount Sinai, found discharge carved rock that had been transmuted by arc discharge at the top of Sinai. He could have chiseled into it based on his experiences when he was up there and brought those down. They could have ended up in this along with what looked like a Baghdad battery to me. And then it could have been radiating particles to the inner surface and having a capacitor. The capacitor could have created electrostatic repulsion. You could have had an advanced connection too.
Wait, hold on, Ramon. If that was true, that was the first time the dude came down with those plates you're saying he carved into it.
Okay.
The second time that he has to go back, here's what it says. I ain't kidding. He went up onto the mount, which was Sinai. When he got up onto the mount, then Ramon, then he is taking up into the mount of the Lord. And in that mount of the Lord, he stays 40 days and 40 nights. And he translates what is dictated to him as the Torah. And he doesn't eat or sleep for 40 days and 40 nights on earth. When he comes back after 40 days and 40 nights, his face is all red from being in the glory of the Lord. And the people say, put a bag over your head. And he now has two 17-foot scrolls that he had to laboriously copy with a whole time of 40 days and nights. So if your first idea was right, that he just did it with a special rock, why didn't he just do it with a special rock the second time, but go to the extreme he went to? Okay, here's the end of the story. I have to go.
Because in magical practices,
magic. Here's the end of it. Think about these things. I was up one day Sundance skiing, and I don't ski, but a friend of mine taught cross country. So this BYU professor came up who was into cellular biology and a PhD, and she taught all this stuff about the stuff about your body. So I started talking to her. She was a doctor, her, very pretty, by the way. And so I started talking to her, and I say, hey, let me ask you something. I ran into this idea, a thing that I can't understand. Maybe you can help. And she said, what's that? I say, I saw this show on TV one time, just walking past on these termite houses in Africa that are about 12 foot high, 14 foot high. Like a guy standing there, he's like dwarfed by it, 6 foot high. They're massive and big, around 14 feet diameter. And they have stovepipes that go up at different heights and stuff, maybe a foot around. And the damn thing holds billions of termites, billions, lots of them, whole bunches. And scientists are looking at these things and they find out nothing will destroy it, nothing. A big anteater combined, knock down the whole sides. These are in Africa. I don't know if they got anteaters. Knock down a whole thing and suck up a whole bunch of them. All of a sudden it grows back up. Everything's back and fine. Everything's okay. And so nothing, whatever it happens, they couldn't understand it. And so they studied it. And here's what they found out. They found out that in this colony, they have a lot of different people that do different things. They have water carrying termites, mud gathering termites, builder termites, war termites, feeder termites. They have every kind of thing that we have in our society. And so what happens is they said, how could that live? How could it work? So they find out the queen, the termites are like a really tiny, big as a flea, but the queen is 4 inches long and she is in an egg that is in a room that science calls the Holy of Holies, or they call it the Royal Chamber. And in this room is this egg that she lives in that is completely enclosed, and she's on girders. This leg is up above the ground, completely in the air. And all the channels from those tubes come down through these holes and they get into this room. And they found out that because they're different heights, the wind coming across goes in and out the other sides. And there are water carrying termites that go nothing but water in the well underneath. They take it up and they don't live in these holes. They live in the walls. And so they dump water out the holes that run down the inside. So when the air comes through, it air conditions it with the evaporative thing. And when it gets real hot in the summer, about 20, 30 degrees higher, the queen lays, she lays between 30 and 50,000 eggs a day. She'll lay a whole bunch of water carriers. If they have a war and they kill a lot of people off, she starts laying a whole bunch of army guys. And same idea, if she needs builders, she lays a whole lot of mud carrier people. And so they're wondering now, how the hell does she know? How does she know if she's in this egg, what is going on outside of the egg? And so they had to study that. And here's what I had to get to this woman at the end of my story. And I say, what they found out was that what happens is there's food carriers that go out among the population and they take back food to the queen and go these little holes and they go in and feed her, where this room is kept 55 degrees every day of the year. No matter what happens, drought, it don't matter. They keep it that way with air conditioning. And they say, here's what happens. They take with her in the food, they take chemicals And when I said that, this woman doctor looks at me and she said, pheromones. I said, pardon me? She said, pheromones. I said, what? She said, that's what they carry, pheromones. I said, okay, pheromones, chemicals, or there may be chemicals. All I know is they carry the lady chemicals. And so they get these, and what she's able to do is discern from the problems that she's presented in these chemicals or pheromones what she needs to do to lay that many 30, 50,000 eggs to keep it in harmony. What they have found out, though, stymied them. They found out if the egg cracks, if there's a crack in the damn plaster of the fucking egg, they go and they take that, they have to move her to another location. If it breaks, whatever they do, whatever happens, if that egg cracks or it's out of that functional thing where it works, like if you break a TV tube in your old television, it didn't show no more. If the egg cracks, they feed her the same food, they feed her the same pheromones, but she can no longer understand them, and the whole thing dies. Righteous termites, Catholic termites, white atheist, the whole thing dies. Now you explain to me, because she could not, why, if that egg cracks, can't she get the information no more, or if she does? So what I'm telling you, Ramon is right. We can get the information we need from the DNA that reaches through that brain of ours and the things between the synapses where you don't store nothing in your brain. It all comes from the scientific field that they're saying, or as Neil would say it, the Akashic record. And that's what you do. When you need something, it goes to get it and back. You don't store it in your brain. And so therefore the knowledge is there. And
The Akashic
therefore
record sounds like something I would say.
Yeah, probably you. But I'll give you I'll give you a Sheldrake idea there, because I'm digging that. I mean, if the egg is a resonance chamber and it's hearing hearing, but getting vibrations from every one of
Sensing
its
it.
children through the what's it called there? What does Sheldrake call it? The metaphoric field, metagenic field, something field?
Yeah.
Morphogenic.
Morphic resonance.
Morphic resonance,
Morphogenic.
thank you. Yeah, so that field. So and if it's sensing from that, if that egg cracks, well, then suddenly you're no longer going to get anything because it can't hear through it.
Can't get the resonance.
Yeah, it's like
Absolutely.
an antenna.
I agree, but it's functional. If that cracks, the whole thing dies. What I am saying is we as a people, our temple is broke. The temple of the egg for the termites, and God is no respecter of termites. If you read about what happens to Ezekiel, and they say, what happened to the temples? It says in Ezekiel that temples can be desecrated to where they don't function anymore. And what's one of the ways? Here's what it says. There's a lot of different ways, but it says, by building thy posts upon my posts and thy pillars upon my pillars. So therefore, if you build a building too close to the place, it don't function no more. Okay, that's what it's saying. If you are messing up the form, like if you have a magnifying glass and you scrape up a flat part on the center, it don't see no more. And that's what's happening.
Well, actually, you might be, if I might just tell you real quick, that reason I enjoyed the Julian Jaynes idea is because he would agree with you that on both of those things, a lot of this has to do with, like, I know what you refer to when you say graven images, since you told me this before, so I know what you're referring to there. But if you're thinking about the Ark of the Covenant as something that held something that, for example, uranium or something radioactive, and we were in a electric field that radioactivity increased, then it would be a self-generating capacitor, which would be very interesting. This could be leftover, I use air quotes, technology from the Cometians way back when. One of those things
research.
that is,
Instead of calling it technology, let's call it research, because you're talking thousands of years of people coming down. I mean, there's a very strong likelihood that the first Egyptians, if you're not talking, Younger Dryas, if you're talking early pre-dynastic people, they were probably Sumerians.
Well, and the way that they built, I mean, Brian Forrester exemplifies this perfectly. How some of these
They would be
1,000
peoples from
tons
Arata,
granite stones
sorry.
and stuff. Pardon?
They would have been peoples from Arata.
Well, it doesn't
Arata
matter
is
where
the
they're
place
from.
where the Sumerians say that they came from.
We don't want to
thought
get dwelling on this. Okay.
Wait, I gotta contest that. I'm pretty
Sorry.
sure when one guy talked to me who was very knowledgeable about the scriptures, talked to him at the University of Utah where he taught religion for 2 hours, and he said to me, "Okay, Bob," he said, "if that's the case, I understand what you're saying, but let me ask you a question." This is a doctor of religion. "If that's the case, well, then where did God come from?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, but I don't think he came from Altoona."
Okay, but I don't. But
Anyway, I don't understand that one, but still, what I'm trying to say though,
Home, Sweden or something, or he didn't come from Bogus Town, any little taste. And so we don't know what's at the side. When they asked Stephen Hawking what's outside of that, he said it's elsewhere. Now the Japanese are saying that we get all of our energy from outer space, deep space. We don't know where it's coming from or who's doing it. Their rendition of the universe is a holograph, and it shows the universe with two angular lines coming down to a box. My question is, who turns on the box?
Well, there's three different. If a person says, "Does God exist?" Well, there's at least three different yeses, and so the question is, which yes are you talking about? If you're going to talk about the great one God, I think that mankind is continually exploring the universe and the source of all energy, all the forces, all the different kinds of fields and everything, and trying to figure that out. If you're going to talk about the Middle Eastern God, then you have to go back to talking about the planets. And there's the mythological evidence around the world is pretty clear that they were talking about Saturn and Jupiter. However, there's Egyptian and Chinese glyphs that show very clearly that they may have, or show very, let's say, overtly that God appears to be that thing which was governing all of those bodies and was in them and through them. And the entire reason I wrote a paper about that is that there was a sinologist who was asking who were the Shang kings asking, because when they look at Shangdi, it was like a flat hierarchy where all the spirits were Shangdi, and that matches the description of Elohim. Elohim is the limbs and the parts, but they're all El. It's all one continuous.
yeah, the three into
Lord.
one up in the sky.
The three
thing.
into one. Yes.
Oh.
And so that concept was also in the Chinese. Is they were asking.
Or what?
Yeah, they were asking the spirits. No, there's just Shangdi. This is pre. You're talking that legend that you're talking about would have been from the Han Dynasty, looking backward.
Okay.
The Shangdi is the religion that existed when they actually were writing on turtle shells and bones. So the spirits that they were asking were also Shangdi. They weren't individual spirits like this tree who lives over there and this deer who lives over here. They were all Shangdi. All of it was and Shang just means above, and Di means God. So you have the above God, the one God above. Right. And the weapon, as I went over, the weapon, Ge, also is a homonym for oneself. And it's all plasma glyphs, every bit of it. Even Taiji Chuan. I looked into the Taiji, meaning the yin and yang. The Tai, of course, we've talked about, the greatest, and Ji, meaning extremity. And even the fist, Chuan, which we use for martial arts, all of them are plasma glyphs, every single one. They all go back to the Saturnian and Jovian ages. So then yes, you have this God that exists. But in their worshiping of that version of God or this version of God, and the movement from Mesopotamia over to Egypt, and then they were probably taken over by a dynastic another dynastic people, and then they became quote slaves, but they lived there. I mean, they were residents, and then they left, and Moses had access to the real information about what it was. He may have had some schematics, you know, he may have had some serious knowledge of how that stuff worked, but it would have been research gathered over thousands of years, unless we're going to argue aliens again.
Oh, no, I wasn't actually thinking about the aliens part as much as I was thinking about, see, I recall a story about when I was watching the 2,000-year-old computer about the Antikythera mechanism, and it referred to a Roman general who 300 years after the event talked about how his grandfather had conquered Sicily and took back this thing that would accurately depict where all the stars were and blah, 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 blah. And this device was eventually lost on a trip. So this is likely where it ended up and was eventually found. However, I was thinking more like that, where the this object, which was the Ark, which was holy to the Egyptians, where apparently Pharaoh was and Ramesses and or whoever Moses was at the time, and the baby and down the river thing, if that's even remotely true, he stole that from the Egyptians, and it could have been one of these things that was left over. That's all I was thinking.
Yeah, but the point being, though, if it was a capacitor, a self-generating capacitor, for lack of a better word, you have essentially God in a box, because the myth around the world is that God was the force that was going between the planets. It was going all around and connecting them and uplifting them, and it could lift up the Red Sea, etc. So you're taking a chunk of that, and you're, of course, through worldwide magical practice of thought, prayer, self-impoverishment, ascetic practices, making it holy, putting it into the covenant, and then you're having an interaction with that. And it's not any less sacred, because the state of being in which you are in, the atavistic state or the transcendental state, is a holy state. And it's one of the things that
even their engineering was intermixed with religion. I mean, they talk about the divinity of the substance. Of course, you see it in the sky. Well,
should be. One of
I recognize that it needs to be. I think it needs to be examined scientifically, yes, but I don't know.
There's no difference.
I guess the
word science originally included it.
It needs to be included. You're right.
The entire problem in our modern society is that we do separate them, but I want to tell you who doesn't separate them: A, the elite, and B, the scientists. When they do the research and they splice up pigs and stuff, they're well aware of the ethical concerns, and there are numerous studies of scientists who have depressions and things because of what they've done. They know that it should be discussed, and there are a lot of scientists are actually people of faith, but there is no reason. Of course, there's no reason to suspect that us talking like this across long distances isn't a magical or mystical experience. It is 100%.
Well, it's using the exact same power that they were using there, except that in many cases they did not have. I mean, it seems that they may have developed some ability to compute, but a lot of the stuff, especially when they hear God talking to them, a lot of that stuff was explained very clearly from the way that our brains were in Peratt's time, when they, or well, not Peratt's time, in Julian Jaynes' work regarding the bicameral mind. He refers to this specifically, how we very much hallucinated answers, and
hallucinated or just have better access to DMT, because when you meditate, you can produce your own DMT. You can get off the horn right now, go meditate, and you can make your own DMT. You know why people, they end up seeing Bigfoot? The Cherokee had a Bigfoot tradition before the white man came here, and they said that their Bigfoot could come and go between the veil. And so how does that happen? You're in nature, you're moving, you get into an atavistic state, and your pineal gland releases DMT. And you start to see different things. And so
I wasn't thinking about it in a scientific term like that. I meant that he referred to the fact that we were very literal creatures prior to a certain time. We were clearly not thinking the same way we are now. We didn't have a certain ability.
God is our Father in heaven.
Well, yes, but these people, wherever, like the thing that you're arguing there, Robert, when you said, if you look at the Ten Commandments, the very first one refers to, hey, all these other voices, all the other things that give you voices, shut them off, destroy them.
No,
The
it
only
doesn't
voice
say
is from me.
Whoa, whoa, it don't say that. He says
Yeah, it
this.
does. You shall not make a
I
covenant with the people of this land. You
thy
shall not
God,
break their.
thou shalt have, wait, thou shalt have no other gods before me. You can have all the gods you want. You just have to understand the main God of creation,
That's right.
which is the God of Genesis.
No. I meant that's the original thing that I was quoting from Ramon's little link right on the screen here. You shall
Well, they're
not make the
both.
covenant of the people of this land. You shall break down their altars, groves, images, and worship no other gods.
That's
So
what
that
because
being
it's
the
a-
original.
That's the
Uh,
literalist interpretation.
Here's one here. Go to the second one. Okay, here's this one. I don't know what this means. Honest to God, I did not ever know what it means. This is what I did know it means. Thou shalt not take the name of God in vain. That's it. That is the second, before everything else, even graven images, you can do that. Before everything, don't take his name in vain, or that name in vain. So what does that mean, do you think?
don't piss him
Uh,
off, or he'll hit us with lightning bolts again.
Yeah,
That's
I
right.
mean,
Here's what I was thinking one day. Here's God sitting up there as we figure him on the cloud with all the angels having the harps playing and shit. And so he says, you know, they can say God bless it all day long, but if they say the opposite to that, I'm cutting them off. I don't believe so. What does that really say? And let me explain to you what the word says. Thou shalt not take. Number question one. Take what, how, where. It don't say, speak, voice, opine. It says, thou shalt not take. That means, in the scriptures especially, that means it should take upon yourself. Thou shalt not take upon yourself God's name. What's God's name that he's talking about? It ain't God the devil, God the ghost. It's God in Genesis.
yeah.
What it says is, thou shalt not take the name of Elohim in vain, or in Hebrew, it can also mean emptiness. Thou
Yeah.
shalt not take upon you the name of Elohim in emptiness. The name of Elohim, if in Genesis, and all the rabbis I've asked, what does it mean? It means male, female creation, end of story. It doesn't mean anything else. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, that ain't nowhere. It don't mean nothing but male, female creation. And God said, let us, whoever he's talking to, Elohim, let us make man in our own image. He makes a woman, he's talking to his wife. Let us make man in our own image, male and female. That's what it is. If Elohim means male, female creation, that thing is saying, thou shalt not take upon you the covenant. And you get baptized as a Christian, you're taking upon you the name of Jesus Christ in your baptism. When
It's
you
all
take
very
upon you the
complicated.
name of the
It's all
covenant of Elohim, you're
Yeah.
taking upon you the name of the covenant of male female creation. The covenant of male female creation is marriage. We came here in the first chapter of the book to leave our parents and
okay.
marry and act as God, procreate.
Robert,
In fact,
Robert,
screw them
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Robert.
But what that
That's
means
all
is,
very. That's all very complicated
let
answer
me
for
let me
something.
finish the end. The end. Thou shalt not take upon you the covenant of marriage in emptiness. Same sex marriage.
Okay.
Sodom and Gomorrah passed laws that they
Okay.
Okay.
we passed
Look,
laws.
look.
We're going down the ship.
Okay.
Boom,
Well, I'm
kaboom.
not going to I'm not going to disagree with you that mankind's in a troubled way, but I'm just going to point out that commandment is not in the original list. That is an added commandment, and it's
Here.
probably missing a comma. The comma should probably be, you shall not take the name of God, which would be in vain, which would mean you can't say, I am a golden God, I am God, and then that would be in vain.
Yeah,
That's the most simple way of answering that.
Okay, if Elohim is what the plural nature of God is, it has nothing to do with anything else. What then does that mean? That means that male female creation is what we came here to represent ourselves and test for. So, what that means is, here's what it simply means. When we get back to heaven and God walks into the bar and we're all sitting there and the bartender has a phone in his hand, and he says, "Hey, God, it's your better half," everybody in the bar knows who is on the phone. And so we are, when you take upon yourself the covenant of marriage, Ramon, your wife takes upon her your name. You take upon that in the covenant of marriage,
that's
the
true.
name to act as God. Now, therefore, if our God is literally Heavenly Father and Mother, he calls himself Father, made himself a son. So I would say in every sense that there's a mother that created both of them. And so therefore, if that's the case, we pray to our Father in heaven because he administrates the gospel. He judges in that our Heavenly Mother has unconditional love for all of her children, like Hitler's mother loved him for a while. Our Heavenly Mother doesn't judge us. She sits in love of all of her children, knowing when we get through this shithole we're in,
What are we talking about anymore?
I
equally
don't.
good, equally
Well,
bad.
he's got something on his
What?
mind. That's for sure.
Apparently.
I did have a point. Wait. At the end, can we come back and
Actually, I would like to hear what Jim has to say.
well,
Go
actually,
ahead.
Please.
I don't do good in groups like this, but I had a few comments from way back. But you know, of course, that like Robert Schoch was making the argument for the Rongo language being based on plasma discharge figures, and that would make sense with the whole Hebrew language being based on the same. They're just different sides of the world, but the same
That's
the
right.
same argument.
Yes.
And Robert Schoch, he's more focused on the actual shapes being plasma shapes, where you don't get as much of that maybe in the Hebrew language, but you could see why they would have such a focus then on every stroke mattering, every stroke being significant, because if you're not taking that into account, that those shapes actually represent real things, you'd be losing all that information.
Mm.
Now, as far as the capacitor idea, I just want to get this out of the way. That's where you have to be aware of Chris Dunn's ideas, Graham
I was going to bring
Hancock's.
that up. Yes.
Graham Hancock's idea. Graham Hancock, he had a whole book, and all it did is trace the path of the Ark of the Covenant. But he made good arguments, and all you have to do is see that he's going to take it to Ethiopia, but from originally in Egypt, and that's the key, is that Chris Dunn's ideas. What you see is that, okay, I'll just cut to the chase. The picture I'd have you think is the Ark was in the mount, not on the mount, in the mount, okay, and the Great Pyramid did have in the Grand Gallery, where basically you can set up standing electromagnetic waves and charge up a capacitor if it was in there. And that's where people don't get that. A lot of people know that the Ark is a capacitor. I mean, just by the general form of it. But there's all these theories that maybe you charged it up by wandering through the desert. That was one theory out there, or that you charge it up with sound. But no, you charge it up by putting it in a resonator cavity that builds up those two layers, the standing waves, where electrons pile up in one area. So that would be the idea, is that thing was charged up there and taken from there. And then you get into Graham Hancock's all like into the more kind of conspiratorial history, like why they would take it away from where the piece actually worked and needed to be out into a safe place. And that's
probably
his.
A power source. And you have, Moses could have been making a nice getaway with something that was important to the Pharaoh. I mean, if you're the Pharaoh, why would you cross the Red Sea when there's a giant wall of water? It'd have to be worth it.
That's the whole part that people don't want to get you, where you have to get, besides the scientific part of it, you have to get into that whole political thing of where Moses had that knowledge of the Egyptians, and he took that, so it wasn't basically,
He knew its
So
value.
what could this all lead to? Here's something I was putting together in my head. We know that the great circles that exist are a power form. We know we're learning quicker about how granite and everything else with piezoelectric energy and the great pyramids and the Teotihuacan and all those things. I think even Göbekli Tepe or whatever, they're all built on these circles that they have around the earth. And so my idea was not too long, it ain't my idea, everything's written anyways, but I came to this. If the earth, as Bruce Laybourne says, is really a stellar generator of the sun and stores direct current electricity in the north-south axis, and that builds up and builds up. And that we know the lightning bolts that hit the earth, there's 10,000 a day or a minute, whatever the hell, lots of them. This is a very electrical planet. It creates electricity. And so if that's the case, maybe those people at that time were able to use the electricity of the earth and not have to produce any, like the Egyptians did, putting that rod close that they're showing already with Gable or whatever. That stuff. Maybe that was Ramon. They put the Pharaoh stuff together and it actually created electricity. So if that was the case, that disturbed itself either when the axis changed or they moved and they didn't work anymore. And so now we have built a system where we create electricity by all the fossil fuels and burning it to create it. And that network around the earth has to disturb the electrical structure of the planet itself. It's like putting an
maybe, or it could be a survival response. I mean, a stimulus response. If your species is clearly devoted to this spiritual force, and is clearly not over it or the cataclysms, when you remove that, it's going to seek out that power as a necessary evil. It's just there is a lot of cultures that think that we were to blame, and there probably were several cultures that were trying to harness that force. And when the cataclysms happened, then the herds people, the less educated people, all assumed that it had to do with the behavior of these people continuously tapping into what's basically God's providence.
Right. So what now?
Yeah, there could be some sort of fight in that one.
Okay, we got this big network around the planet. We create electricity, spend billions of dollars a day to produce it. So what if those in power have known some of the things, like we know the military knows stuff, we know they know stuff behind closed doors. What if they know that this system has to be taken down? And that's what the whole project is about. The conflagrations of the earth, the wars and everything, is to bring down the electrical networking structure, because they know now that all those buildings, like Notre Dame, this has already been said, Notre Dame was burned down specifically because it is a generating facility. And if they knew we took down the network, and they take St. Peter's Basilica and all those places and all those things that are all there, and the buildings that the Masons have been doing, and now they're rebuilding them all. They're going into all these old buildings and restructuring. In the Mormon church, they're closing down the Salt Lake Temple for restructuring for 2 years. Now they're doing it. And the one in St. George they're doing. There's a lot of other temple sites and stuff.
That's a bit conspiratorial, though.
I'm sort of with you, but
the top of that thing, the top of it, they spent like almost $500 million on the roof to make it look like the dome and everything, the keyhole figure and all those things that they're showing in the basilica, that if that's the structure, they're building the buildings that are already there, and they're forming those, and they will be the centers of our power. And so therefore, that's what I think is going to happen. They're closing down the network we have, but they're already rebuilding the one to take it over so they can maintain the control.
Well,
I don't.
All right,
so hold up.
Too. Jerusalem, they're doing that. There's a temple there. The Supreme Court in Jerusalem. Look it up. That's all.
What I want to say is, again, I get into good conspiracy theories all the time. You have to have the motive too, and there doesn't appear to be any motive for any powerful person ever to reduce their power. And the electric grid provides power to whoever has it. It's literal power. It's the definition of power as we run our society. Now, while that sounds to me like renovations trying to make religion still relevant in the scientific period, because you still have, it's a transitional thing. Anytime you go from one period to another, whether it was the megalithic to the transition to the religious, or the religious to the scientific period, you have the maintenance. And one thing about religion, and I mean organized bureaucratic religion, not the original religion that the entire world had. When you have an organized religion, one of its better designs, is better than government, is it keeps continuity. It does not die quickly, and it does not change overnight.
Especially why the Byzantine Empire did not die when the Roman Empire did.
That's right. And because government, you can either
not that I'm advocating
it, but you can elect or kill people in a government, or you can overthrow a family, like in the French Revolution. However, with religion, an idea passes from one to the other. This is movie Inception, right? It's the hardest thing to kill is an idea. So at this point, you have two different paradigms. You have the scientific techno paradigm and the technocracy that is growing, and people worshiping an altar of media entertainment, versus the people who want people to be in churches or in mosques or in temples. And that battle, you have to keep yourself relevant. So of course they're going to renovate their buildings, and they're going to try and make it pretty. They're probably going to use symbology. It doesn't mean they understand that symbology. I'd wager that there are most of the 32nd degree Masons don't know a lot of the stuff that we're talking about. That doesn't mean that they're completely ignorant, though. They probably are aware that the Ark was a generator of some kind, but that doesn't mean that they realize that we need to rebuild it, or that they feel that if we, create CERN, there's this conspiracy that you create CERN so that you can open up a gate to hell. There's no indication that that's really what was going on. Does it mean, though, however, you can't generate hell? You absolutely can, because when they fire up CERN, the Earth's magnetosphere likes to drop off, which is a big problem, because we could all die really fast. So it could be a gateway to hell, but I don't think it's a literal hole in the ground that's going to lead to a portal.
Is there proof you could show for that? I'd love a paper or something.
No, it's you. If you follow the BP Earthwatch, he'll show you videos of from the GO satellites, and he'll say, okay, so here's where the CERN turned on, and then here you could see from the satellite the magnetosphere drop off for a couple hours, and then they kick it off, and then it comes back. And that makes sense to me, because the Earth's magnetosphere is powerful to us, but it's not really that powerful scientifically speaking. Like, it's not in the solar system. It's not very strong. It's just a lot stronger than Mars or Venus, and so it is ostensible that we could seriously damage ourselves or the planet doing things like that. In which case, then, if we created the next Atlantis, then the animal husbands and the Aborigines and the tribesmen will be able to rightly say, well, they did it again.
Mm-hmm. However, if I might be so bold, I'm not even sure how we left what we were talking about with regards to the original thing with the SO. But I'm glad that we're here, though, and let me finish up this.
Well, we were talking about Lucifer.
I know, weird. I don't know how this happened. Anyway,
well, because of Ben.
Right.
Okay, let's not talk about that too much. But yeah,
well,
it's kind of
let's deal with
By
anyway.
him, did you mean me?
No, Ben. Anyway, don't worry about it. The point is that I wanted to talk about something that when you hit on something, the principle that we saw before with the increasing pressure inside of piezoelectric containers to create a positive core within granite, done in the Sarakum or whatever, Sakarum, whatever that place with the bull coffins is. And of course, if a similar thing is done in
Serapeum.
Serapeum, thank you.
Yeah.
And if a similar thing is done with the pyramid, which they then pressurize the center and create this a similar effect, what that really is doing is creating a positive center core with a negative outer shell.
Think about it. If you use the Ark, if the Ark is the transport device, but it has the handles to take the items from the Serapeum that you've manufactured. You got a whole floor of manufacturing, and then you take it and then you carry it and then you put it inside the king's coffin there inside the Great Pyramid. You're transporting material. You need something to transport that material. And if
Yes.
Moses ran off with that, that would be a problem for anybody.
However, I was just mentioning the core of it, which was if it was actually something that contained, for example, a radioactive substance, that would also do the exact same thing. It would charge up one of the plates that was attached to the inner wall. The outer plate would be separated from it, and there would be a constant charge built up onto one plate because it would be absorbing all of those these neutrons.
It was probably a chemical reaction.
Because it wouldn't even have to be chemical, but still.
And on top of that, we have two giant pits, like El Ariwan. So no, I'm not saying that correctly. Where they obviously were manufacturing something, because we have the trail of granite that leads to that pit that is only in that from the ramp, takes an L and goes directly to the pit. And then they covered the pit, and they filled it up, and they covered it, and
yes,
they
I
tried
saw
to
that.
keep
I
it
love
from
that.
escaping.
The way that, yes, we were using that.
So
was
transport
it the saw?
that.
Was it near the saw? It was.
No,
we're
not talking about the saw. We're talking about the great pit of El Ariwan, and they had an oval pit that they were obviously doing chemical work.
Oh,
in.
I thought that's where they put the saw blade in. It was
no,
spinning.
the saw the giant saw blades were right next to the
I thought it was
they
the
were
boat
manufacturing.
Yeah.
or
the
El
so-called boat thing.
Ali, or sorry,
Ali.
it's right beside the Egyptian air base. They've been filling it in with
Yes.
garbage.
Yes, but the original is a big hole. There was no stones on the side. It was all clay, but the bottom was limestone, except in the path from the ramp to the pit to the tub. Okay, that was a rosy type of granite, so clearly a more hard material.
Yeah, the
and
one granite.
when they actually found this, it had been filled up with some type of base material and then covered. The lid was left down. The other ones have many of them have been left open, and there's never been any bodies ever found in any of them.
No, true.
And so they were producing something, and then they must have been taking that over to the Serapeum, finishing the manufacturing process, or maybe it was the other way around. Maybe the Serapeum was the first step, and then the Great Pit was the finishing, and then taking it over there. Now, if you have a cataclysm, and now big events are happening, and Moses takes the chance to kind of revolutionize, and hey, I'm going to take my people and go, then he has a convenient device that's carrying this
that would cripple
shielded
their society
device.
if I stole it. Yeah,
it would cripple them, but more importantly, it would be shielded. And now you take sacred stones that have come from the sky and you put it in, and it's no less divine, it's no less miraculous. I mean, just imagine seeing 1,000 foot of water on either side of you. Now, if you're the Pharaoh, what incentive do you have to go into that? Because that is a scary, scary situation. You've got to have a pretty good reason that you can't just go around and catch up with them on the other side. You're in a hurry.
Yeah.
And then of course there was a thunderbolt. Velikovsky is our source for that, because he looked into the Hebrew records. There was a thunderbolt nearby, and it changed the charge, and all the water came crashing down.
Well, there could have been actually something in the sky that's causing this whole thing to happen. Like to cause a revolution. I mean, to cause him to go,
but if it was a comet,
I don't believe in your God. I believe in these gods. We're leaving now. We're worshiping that thing in the sky. Screw you.
I think very likely because Moses and Joshua didn't necessarily at first seem to agree.
I noticed that.
You know, Moses goes off and everybody's like, okay, well, let's make a golden calf. And Joshua's like, great, good idea. You know. Later on, of course, there's long dialogues of him, and a lot of people don't know this because they haven't read Exodus and the following books. But Moses and Joshua are actually having long conversations with the Lord, and Joshua's in on the entire thing. It's not only Moses.
Can I interject?
I have
a question.
Thank you.
Hi. I've studied the Bible for decades. I don't remember Joshua being the one building the golden calf in compliance with the people. That was Aaron. Joshua took Moses' side on pretty much everything.
Yeah, sorry, Aaron.
Okay.
Okay. Well, no need to argue everything on this.
No,
one.
He's right.
He's right. I wanted to do something else though, because if we could be so kind, Tim joined us to talk about the SO thing, and we sort of went right off track there, right in the middle of it. And Now, we've been here for 2 hours. Obviously, our friend is going to be showing up later, I assume, buddy. You haven't really let us know, but I assume that obviously he's been delayed in somewhat. So that's totally understandable. He got in a car accident. So no arguments there. But since it's been 2 hours, usually I'm not going to keep you here all day because we could just be waiting until 9 o'clock. And as much as I would love to chat with you all, we probably have other things to do. However, if we could at least finish our thoughts on the SO thing, because and I just want to let you know that Mike is here and of course Tim is here. Both of these individuals are joining basically because of this situation. So I just wanted to sort of direct it there before we left, unless someone else really needs to talk about something else like really bad.
I will make the call when I do get a hold of David and find out he is okay from the accident.
Good. I'm glad.
When it does happen later, I'll just call, and anybody is welcome to answer.
Well, yeah, give us a 20 or 30-minute window if you can, but yes.
Yeah,
Ahead of time.
I'll give a little warning.
Once you start setting them up for it, just let us know that you're setting them up for it. That's all.
Yeah. Cool.
So I'm going to turn off my recording because this was a great conversation and I really enjoyed it. But I mean, obviously going longer on this, I mean, this is a Bible thumping exercise. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be actually kind
I'm
of cool.
sorry if I went too much over.
No. I started recording it, so don't pretend I didn't. Okay. I recorded the whole darn thing.
Thank you very much. I got to vent a lot of stuff out that I was thinking about. Can think about those things. Next time, boys and girls, we can talk about some other big things like what really is the glory of the Lord that Joseph Blumrich wrote about.
I always pictured that as a sort of a plasma thing, but the plasma fire around a being or around a planet. But you know what? I'm willing to hear anything. However,
I still want to know what a graven image is.
Oh, I'll tell you about that. I'll tell you personally about that.
Later.
We got the 25
Yeah,
cents
later. It'll blow your mind. It's really creepy shit. Anyway.
Is that going to be the cliffhanger? Seriously?
It's going to have to be because I'll tell you. Trust me, the more we start talking about it, it'll get really creepy really fast. So,
Robert, why don't you tell us?
All right. Thank you for joining us for episode 6. This is the electric view and the Universal Ones collective, artist collective, collaboration. Love is watching. The Universal Ones, the electric view. We'd love to thank you. None of this would be possible without you.